We don't often hear from child-free men as much as we hear from child-free women. So I decided to interview my partner, Rick, so that he can share his private thoughts and personal experience with being child-free. He opens up about dating as a child-free man, losing friends to fatherhood, his family's opinion on us not having children, and he even revealed a secret assumption about my choice not to have kids that I have never heard before. Let's dive in.
All right, here we go. My first interview. I'm very excited. Can't you tell? We'll talk all about
Is it too much coffee?
What's in my probably too much coffee this morning. We're going to get into what's in my mind as a child-free man.
Yes.
So I'm very excited to get into it. So ask away.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do a lot of the talking as far as the child-free connection is concerned, but people have so many questions for you all the time. As a child-free man in his 50s, can we say in your 50s if you are 50?
I am proud to be 50.
Okay, good.
I'm almost 51.
That's
but,
true.
Yeah,
That's true.
Almost 51.
So
and before you start, can I just shout out our setup, our couch interview?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It took us a while to figure out how we were going to do this together.
Exactly. And I know it looks weird, but it seemed to be the best way for it to work. All right, go ahead.
Absolutely. Okay. So what we did was we compiled questions from our IG audience, which you have not seen. I did not show them to you.
Correct.
And also questions that I have, because we talk about this topic so much, but I don't think I've questioned you that much about this topic. So maybe I'll be finding out things that I don't know myself. And yeah, so that's what we're going to do. How do you feel about that?
Let's get into it. I'm fine. It's
okay,
great.
Perfect. So before we start, I thought that we could go back to your childhood just so that people get an idea of how you grew up. Maybe you can tell us where you grew up and what your family dynamic was, as far as how many siblings you have, and did your home have the traditional gender roles when it comes to your mom and your dad?
Sure. So I grew up in Northern Virginia. It's about an hour outside of the DC area. I have a unique upbringing that you know about, but I will be happy to share. So my mom divorced my biological father when I was very young. She remarried my stepfather, who had 2 kids previously. So I was brought in as the third to the family of my stepfather. And they went on to have 2 children as well. So those were my half brothers. So I had 2 stepbrothers and 2 half brothers growing up.
So 5 boys in a home seems to me really chaotic. Was it? Or
it was unique because the whole thing was very confusing to me, more now when I look back on it. But at the time, I mean, it was me and my mom. I don't remember a lot of that time, but once I was kind of thrusted into this new family dynamic, I remember being very confused. Like, what's going on? I have 2 new brothers, and then my mom got pregnant and had 2 more kids. So it was an interesting time for me looking back. But when you're in it, it's kind of relative to your experience at that point. You know what I mean? So,
right. Like 5 boys in a house was normal to you. Plus having, 5 of you? Yeah, 5 of you.
Yeah,
so there's
5 including
7 people in the house.
Yes.
Plus a dog.
Yes.
And that probably became quite normal after you became accustomed to it, because obviously you and your mom were alone first. So that was your baseline for family in general.
It was.
As far as the noise, as far as the movement of the home.
Yeah. And we grew up in a pretty normal, you asked about chaos in the household, and I have the type of parents that went to another room and quietly whispered argued. I didn't have that loud arguing, and I actually give them a lot of credit for that. I don't know if that hurt me or helped me. Now that I look back on it.
Different interview.
Yeah, that's a whole different interview. But so I don't think it was that chaotic. I mean, my brothers and I had just normal brother fights across the board, but I don't think it was anything crazy. if anything, it was just more confusing, I think, to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you think that because you grew up in a big family, when, let's say, you were in high school or college and you thought about your own family in the future, were you imagining to have the same experience as far as having a large family when you got older?
When I was younger in that family dynamic,
When you were in high school and college and you thought of your future, were you imagining this large family?
no. So I don't think, to be fair, I was imagining my family at all when I was younger, like even in high school or even college for that matter. I don't think I really kind of took family. Family wasn't something that I really kind of took into consideration
Right.
as I was growing up as a younger adult.
Now, as far as taking it into consideration, is that because you knew this is having, and obviously we talk about the fact that we feel we're a family for sure, and that there's so many different kinds of family now. But back then, we're talking about the 80s. Were you even realizing that you had a choice as far as what family would look like in the future? Or did you feel that's definitely going to happen? I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'll deal with that later.
Yeah, I would say that I thought that's just what happens is you grow older and you'll have a family. I never really understood that there was a choice. I never got that 100%. I never was thinking, oh, I'll have a choice one day not to have children. It was, I'll have children eventually, but right now it's out of my
Yeah.
mind. It's not something I'm thinking of.
And what about your parents? Did they ever say to you anything about having children or how they felt about it, or were they excited about it?
I didn't receive much pressure about that. It's weird. I don't know if it's a guy thing because there was 5 boys in the house and there was no girls. So I don't know if that conversation just wasn't had. It wasn't had one-on-one. It wasn't had as a group. It wasn't had at all. It was more of, I see other people having families. Later, I saw my brother get married and start having families. Eventually, I will do this.
Right. Right.
But there wasn't much thought. There wasn't much discussion. It was absent from our conversations. I just think it was on an autopilot type of situation, that for guys, they'll meet a girl and they'll have kids. So there was no reason to discuss it.
I think I'm asking you because I remember you telling me that your mom had said something to the fact of, this is the best thing ever, or am I wrong?
My mom said to me that having kids and family, it will be your greatest joy in life.
Okay.
I remember hearing that a lot. And that was kind of not just by my mom, but I think that was repeated from other people too. I would hear that, like, having kids is that's what brings you the most joy.
Right.
That was about the extent of the pressure that I received.
Right. And that makes sense. I mean, I wouldn't even call that pressure, right? I don't even think that your mom had 5 boys in the house, and she also came from a large family, I think of 10.
Yes.
Right?
My mom is one of 10.
One of 10.
Which is crazy. Yeah.
So I think that is truly, I mean, to this day, she really means it, because for her children and her grandchildren really do bring her the most joy in her life. So,
Yeah.
so it's interesting when people share that, because it's also coming from their personal experience and their needs and their wants. So it gets passed down to their children.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was spoken in a general way.
Right.
It wasn't like, I think that having kids is the most joy that I've received. So therefore, I think you will receive this too. It was more of, this is fact. Like, having kids equals happiness and joy.
Right. Right.
So who wouldn't want to sign up for that, right? It's just like one of those things where it's like, okay,
Right.
as a being, you're being influenced by your parents and some friends maybe, but
Right.
ultimately, when I heard that, I'm like, yeah, I guess I want that. I never asked myself, is that the right thing for me though?
Right.
Which I think is an important thing to bring up as we kind of
Yeah,
go into
which
this.
we'll be talking about
Yeah.
definitely. So tell me about once you started having serious relationships, maybe in your late 20s. And actually, let me backtrack a little bit. So you and I have been together. We just celebrated our 7-year anniversary. Yay.
Correct.
And so prior to that, you had several relationships, you were engaged. I had several relationships. I used to be married. So by the time we started dating each other, this was something that we already knew about each other. And we'll get back to us in a second. But I want to get back to your 20s, maybe early 30s, mid 30s, when you were dating. And what was the child conversation when you started to get, did it come up right away? Did it only come up with the woman that you were engaged to? Did it come up all the time? What was that like for you?
So I'd say it came in like two stages. Stage one, my younger relationships, like high school and college, and maybe in my early career, like 20s and mid 30s, up to about mid 30, there was no real conversation. I think even with the girls that I personally, that I dated, there was, I don't think it was in our near purview, if that's the right
Yeah,
word.
you weren't thinking
We
about
weren't
it.
thinking
Yeah.
about it. So there was really no discussion. I mean, maybe a couple comments here and there, like, oh, I definitely want kids. But it was like, okay, well, you're not going to have them now. So we'll just punt that down the field and not worry about it. And maybe that was irresponsible of me at the time, but it's kind of something that just went ignored. So stage two was later. So that's when I got engaged. And when I got engaged, that was the first time where kids really came up.
Well,
As like
let me just ask you this. Before the engagement, what was the conversation around children?
we both did, there was no discussion. It was pretty much, her what she had said that she wanted. She wanted to have children. She wanted 3 specifically. And at that point, I really was just like, okay, if I want to stay in this relationship, 3 children it is. 3 kids it is. So that was to be fair, she really laid that out early. She made it
In the
clear.
relationship?
In
Early
the
in the
relationship.
relationship?
Yeah, she made it clear.
Okay.
And at the time, again, not really understanding, coming off the heels of not really discussing it prior relationships and now having a serious relationship, that I was still really immature and wasn't quite knowledgeable enough that this choice is a big one and this is something that you should talk about and really consider. It was almost, I fell into yeah, of course we'll have kids. That's what
Right.
you do. I was still in that what you do moment, but at the same time, I knew if I chose not to, it would be a deal breaker for our relationship for sure. I mean, she was adamant about having kids.
Yeah, and I think that probably a lot of people out there feel the same way as far as saving the relationship and
Yeah.
making sure that, because we do hear from our community quite a bit from people saying, oh, he said it's up to me, or whatever you want to do,
Sure.
or those types of comments. And I have very strong feelings about that because it's not up to one person, right? There's 2 people that are doing the parenting. How do you, when you agreed, yeah, sure, let's have 3 children, did you imagine yourself having 50% of the responsibility or not? Like, how did you justify, like, sure, let's have 3?
So I grew up in a traditional household. We won't go back into that, but very religious. And I think it was also a sign of the times. My from me being 50, my parents were older and they came from a very traditional background. So in my mind at the time, I was just under the assumption that we'll have 3 kids. I'll go work. I'll come home. I mean, the textbook
Yeah.
kind of raising family narrative of just, the father goes and works. The mother stays at home, takes care of the kids, takes them to practice. I come in, we have dinner, read them the nighttime story, and then go to bed and then rinse and repeat.
Right.
Maybe some events on the weekends with the kids and so on and so forth.
Right.
So I think that was just embedded in my mind. Not that it was right, but it was just just, again, I'm just going into this very naive, not understanding what having children and the responsibility that comes with it will require.
Yeah.
And that's really was my mentality. I want to say really it was naive and ignorance and
But you're
looking
being
back.
honest, which I really appreciate, because I think the first time that we talked about it, I was really interested into what your insight on this was, because I think the reason it came up is because we kept getting that question. My partner says it's up to me. And I think that the issue is when people say, whichever partner says it's up to you, it diminishes their level of responsibility in a number of ways, not in just the day to day as far as taking care of the child, but if the dynamic of the relationship changes, if the financial situation changes, if anything like that happens, the person who says it's up to you can almost say, well, this was your decision. And then they're allowed to not take as much accountability for it. So that's what I'm glad we're talking about this, because I think it's really important that our audience realizes that when someone says it's up to you, they're actually not giving you the power. They're taking it away, because afterwards it's all on you, whether it goes, it could go well, but it also could not go well.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair point. And I think that, if you always say, if you could go back and tell your younger self something, what would it be? And it would be, when making life decisions, whether that's your career, having children, take a breath and think about it and decide what you want, right? Because I definitely fell into that. That's what you're supposed to do. I'll do this. And I can't say that I would have held that against my ex-fiance. I don't know if I would have been like, well, you wanted them, so maybe I would have been into them. Maybe I wouldn't have, but I know that I definitely didn't want them. Looking back,
Right.
It was.
You wanted the relationship to stay intact.
I wanted the relationship to stay intact.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And then getting back to us, by the time we met, I was clear on my child-free choice. And I think we definitely talked about it. We talked about so much on our first date, which was brunch, and it got extended all the way into nighttime. So there was a lot of conversations, a lot of questions. And for us, it wasn't really an in-depth conversation, because people ask us all the time, how did we come to the conclusion? How did we come to the decision? But for the two of us, we both came in, at least I came in knowing I was 100% child-free. And then you were telling me, oh, I don't want kids either. Great. And then we kept it moving, right? So how did that feel for you, knowing that I came into it, knowing I was 100% child-free, and your past relationships had not gone that way?
My first response, I remember thinking, was, thank God. Relief. Now
Right.
There's part two, and I don't think I've ever shared this with you before.
Okay.
The second thought was, she's saying that for now, but she's going to eventually want it. I've never mentioned that to you, but that only comes from past relationships where I had when I was younger.
Yeah.
Even though we didn't talk about kids, they said they didn't want them, and now they have them. So I look back and I think that they really did. They just didn't, maybe they were too young, but they said that they didn't want them. Like, I don't know if they meant now or forever. But when you said, I don't want kids, again, first reaction was relief. Second reaction was, oh, how long is it going to take before she says, well, maybe one.
Really?
Maybe one. I think it was going to be a maybe one conversation that you were going to have with me.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
because I never gave off that I'm on the fence vibe.
No,
at all.
you never did. And that's, I hate to say that I didn't, wasn't saying that you were lying to me. I think it was just more.
Well, no, I think you're speaking of personal experience, because if you've known women in the past to say, I don't want kids, and then say, okay, maybe just one or maybe just two, you're speaking of personal experience. And that's what we talk a lot about this with our community, because a lot of our belief system comes from maybe 8 to 10 people, maybe 6 to 8 people, and who we interact with and what they tell us. And that just becomes our belief system.
Yeah. As far as having the choice to have children.
As far as anything we believe, but especially that too. Yeah. Anything that we believe. It's, if I was your, let's say, eighth girlfriend and the six of them had said, I don't want kids, and then changed their minds, of course you're going to think that by the time you get to 7 and 8, probably the same thing is going to happen.
Yeah. It's interesting. I never thought about that. Having a small circle that's around you, family and friends, and the majority of them most likely are going to have kids.
Right.
So your influence is a lot more, you have a lot more pressure from the majority.
Yeah. And it's
than you
not
do for maybe the one person out of that group that chooses not to.
Right.
That's not you.
Right. And it's not even pressure. It's just become so normalized because your circle is parenting and your circle is getting pregnant and your circle is talking about the joys of parenthood. So it's very hard to figure out what exactly it is that you want, especially if you're leaning towards being child free, because it's so outside of the norm of your immediate circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and another confession you may not be aware of, or maybe you are,
Okay.
is, and this is weird for me to say because we've been together for 7 years, and
Right.
and again, it's going to sound like ignorance, the wrong word, I guess, naive. That I was naive, that I didn't even understand that there was a choice until you launched the Childfree Connection.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at that. I'm not surprised at
I
all.
didn't really get it until you,
Yeah.
I think how the Childfree Connection was spawned was the fact that you had sent out a post on your personal account, for those who don't know, and that kind of started generating an idea around, wow, there is a community out there that feels how I do, and we should be more vocal. And after research and so on and so forth, there was more discovery around that. However, once you started doing that, I remember thinking, like, what are you doing? Like, you have kids, you don't? And
Right. You thought that this was going to be, you thought that why would anyone care? Why would anyone even want to talk about this topic? Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't really understand. And I think it's important to note that it really comes down to the fact that this was the choice part, right? I didn't it wasn't that people can talk about whatever they want. I applaud that. I think people should be vocal. But when it really came down to the word choice,
Right.
I didn't understand that was a thing, which
Right.
is just looking back after all the market research you've done. And I've seen all of it, and I've watched it and have cried and laughed and really tried to understand as best as I could the female perspective when it comes to.
Yeah, you were blown away. You had no idea.
I had no
because I
clue.
had expressed to you what my personal experience had been, but it wasn't until, because you're a very fact-based person like I am. So when I started to give you the market research and when I started to show you and give you facts and give you very clear examples from the women I was talking to all over the world, you were very surprised at how
shocked
at how deep this goes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it really made me realize, coming back to the decision to have children and how, in my opinion, is lightly introduced and thought of, if that makes sense. And what I've really come to realize, and why I've become so passionate around the Childfree Connection and connecting and helping other people to understand what we're kind of talking about, is the fact that arguably this is the biggest decision you're going to make. We say arguably, but sometimes we don't think that there's even an argument on this.
Yeah, I think we've decided. We played that game. Remember, we played that game. What decision is most important?
Yeah.
As far as life decision, as far as where your life trajectory is going to go.
Right.
And we came up with a lot of different examples, but we couldn't think of one that was more important than, or more life changing than having children and not having children.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to give you a personal shout out, I think that what's great about your program is working with you on it and going through it so much, is it really lays the groundwork to figure out, what kind of, how the gravity of this decision.
Right.
And why it's important to research, because it is probably the biggest decision you're going to make in your life.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, it changes the trajectory.
Yeah.
in a way that I never really thought of.
Right.
And now as I'm older and I see my friends with kids, that trajectory sounds like a nightmare for me. I'm just serious. I'm saying
I mean, I
not
think,
for me.
no, we say it all the time especially after we have a crazy day and we're so busy all day and we're working and we have errands to run. At the end of the day, we are just wiped. We are wiped. And we always talk about how do people do this with kids?
I just had a conversation this morning with a friend of mine who said that his weekend consisted of both days getting up at 7 a.m. and going to bed at 8 p.m. nonstop kids activities.
Right.
And I said to him, wow, where do you find the energy? Because if I have a doctor's appointment and have to stop by CVS,
we're
frazzled, tired, and overwhelmed
frustrated.
So to throw the dynamic of just like, that's something you need, there
has to be a deep desire.
Yeah.
There has to be a deep
I always
desire.
say you need to dig deep
Yeah.
in that way. Unless you're part of the 1%, of course, that has hired, people that you can afford to hire.
Well, yeah, having all the resources available to you is a completely different story.
Thing. Yeah.
It's a completely different story.
But I give it to my friends who have kids that, work as hard as they do while maintaining a family, especially around the COVID time. And they do a fantastic job, but it's just, I'm not built for that. It's not for me.
Yeah. And I don't think it's that we're not built to hustle or work hard because you and I have both had very demanding careers going. So it's not, I think that people assume that all child-free people are lazy and just want to sit around and not do anything. And sometimes we want to sit around and not do anything. And it's about having the option to control what we do with our time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a priority thing, right? If your priority is to have kids, you're going to carve out that time and dedicate your life to that. But if you're not sure about whether or not you want to have kids, you need to understand that becoming your priority is a lifelong, massive commitment. And not to keep bringing this up, but your program really, really opened my eyes to that. It really did.
I should share with everyone that you actually went through the entire program, which I really appreciated because you said, in order to really understand what's happening, what's going on, what you're teaching inside your program, I really should go through it. And you did. And I didn't ask you to do it.
No.
You just did it on your own. And I just really appreciated that because it showed, because you are more behind the scenes in this project a lot of the time.
Right.
And I don't think people realize how involved you are and how deeply you care about this, about the Childfree connection, about the program, about everything that we're building. We talk about it all the time, and your passion is just as equal as mine. So I'm going to shout you back out and say thank you for that, because I think that, and also what we talked about and what you said was that when we were building the program, it wasn't about 50% I want to have a kid, 50% I want to be a mom. It was to serve the women in our community who were already leaning towards or had decided to be child free. And we just focus on that path, on lighting that path. And once you realized that part of it and it became so organic to you because you had said to me, that's exactly what we're trying to do, it all just came together for you. Yeah,
the program, I selfishly indulged in going through that program, because it was my moment to really understand. As much as I was happy we decided not to have kids, I needed to understand what was behind the choice. And that's what really resonated with me. after I finished it, it brought me such clarity that my decision was the right decision. Not that I doubted it,
Yeah.
but I didn't understand it. Again, I'm still coming off the heels of you, saying you don't want kids. We're 7 years in.
Right.
I'm thinking like, okay, great. We're not
Right.
having kids, but I
Right.
never had closure on that topic of understanding what that choice and what that would have meant to my life. And
Right.
getting that overview
Mm-hmm.
and the history of children all the way to the future and what your elder years are going to look like really allowed me to have like I said, have a strong foundation that this was definitely the right choice for me.
The amount of thought, at least that I put in, and the amount of thought that so many people in our community and our program put into this is insane. There is so much to dissect, whether it's your personal development, whether it's your conditioning, who's influence in your life. There's just so much to break down that people don't think about. Now, we're not talking about the people in our community who have known since the time they were 2 that
Right.
they wanted to be child free,
Yeah.
because there's no thought in there,
Yeah.
and they're just a different group. And I'm happy for them that they have so much clarity and they could just move forward. But we're talking about the people in our community that had more of the gray area experience that I had and that we talk about all the time.
Yeah.
But okay, so let me ask you, what at any point, maybe ever or since we've been dating, have you thought to yourself, maybe I made a mistake? Or have you thought to myself, I'm never going to have that experience? And the reason I ask is because I teach this in my program. I call them snapshots. And it's those moments where someone actually just shared a story the other day that when she is at I think her husband coaches a team or something. When she's at a game and let's say she sees a kid score the winning basket and then they run over to their parents and they're cheering and there's this big hug, it makes her feel, oh, I'm never going to have that moment. So those are what I call snapshot moments. I have had my own in the past. So I wonder, as a child-free man, do you have those moments where you look at a father and a child or children and you say to yourself, oh, I'm never going to know what that feels like?
I don't. I personally don't. I don't have. Let me say this. I understand that a lot of my friends have wanted that, and
Well, we're talking about you, so you don't,
okay.
it's,
So I think I know. I've never ever thought. It's weird because my dad, I was involved with a lot of activities and I won a lot of medals and I got a lot of trophies and I did all that stuff. But I remember being like, I don't even want to, I don't really get it. I don't know. Like, it was just one of those things where when that was happening, I never said to myself, I can't wait to do this with my kids.
right.
It was like one of these things that I did and I tried to do the best I could. And occasionally I won a trophy and my dad congratulated me on that. And that was it. Throwing a ball with my kid in the backyard. No, I think the closest that I come to having some sort of emotional response about a father and a child is when I see it in a movie, when there's an emotional moment between like Field of Dreams. A lot of people don't know that movie, but it's an old movie, Kevin Costner movie. And he at the very end, I won't go into it, but he turns to his father who had died, but he came back to life. It's a whole thing, and said, "Dad, you want to have a catch?" And I mean, even saying it now, I get a little emotional because but it's not about that.
Yeah.
So I used to think like, oh, what is that? When I dug deep, it's about the fact that I came from a messed up family and I didn't have a connection to my father.
Right.
So I wanted a connection as a young boy,
Right.
not that I want to be a father and have a connection with my young son.
Right.
So once I realized that, it really became clear to me, like, yeah, fatherhood is not for me. It never has been. I dodged it somehow.
Yeah.
I really did. I mean, there's been some close calls. I think we all have had. And
You bring up an interesting point because oftentimes, and we've gotten the comments on our YouTube videos and DMs on IG, and people in our community also share with us that it is often thought that people who had childhood trauma in any way, when it has to do with either their parents or the family dynamic, siblings, whatever, and that's the reason that they choose to be child free, because they didn't have a good experience as children. And I just want to clarify that that is not the case, actually. That research shows that people who had childhood trauma just as much want to have children because they want their children to have a different experience. So
yeah, they want to self-correct what they had gone through.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because I don't want people starting to say, oh, there was childhood trauma, that's why he's not having kids. Because for you, it's clearly not that. And it's just part of your experience, just like it was part of mine. But that's not the sole reason, and there's research to prove it. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and I know, first of all, I'm more aware of my childhood trauma now, and I can look back on it and understand it. And because I have been, we all have, right? I mean, everyone's been through something. A lot of people have been through something. But again, I grew up in a very, normal household, even though there was it was unusual, the dynamic of stepbrothers, half-brothers, and stepfather and all that stuff. It wasn't traumatic in that sense. It was, so I would say I had a very easy luck. I was blessed to have a lucky kind of upbringing, so yeah, I completely agree. And I think whether I had a perfect upbringing, which no one really has, or even abusive, more rougher upbringing, I would have always made this decision. I know looking back, at the time I wasn't, just because I thought that's what you do, but
Right. Right. So what do you think about, because now it seems to be, I think when I started, when I was in my 20s, the magic number was 30, as far as, oh, you better decide by the time you're 30, that's when the clock is ticking, that's when it's going to end. And then as time went on, women started to have children later and later, and then it was 40. Oh, you better decide by 40. So a lot of people feel that this explosion is going to happen at 40 if they don't go one way or the other. And now we're really seeing people start to have, because of hormone treatments and infertility treatments with menopause and all this other technology that's being worked on, women are starting to have kids at 50, 51. And I wonder if I was to wake up one day and say to you, I have been thinking about this a lot, and here are my XYZ reasons, but I really, really want to have a baby with you. Let's say that happened tomorrow. How would you feel about that?
I would start stacking up arguments against it. And I think the first one would be arithmetic. I would say you're 50, even though you can have one. When the kid is 20, you're going to be 70.
Right.
And you don't have energy now. Mm-hmm. So can you imagine what that's going to feel like in 20 years?
Right.
So
right.
That's the kid would have just left for college.
To clarify, I am 46.
Right. Well, I mean, it's 46, but it would take a while.
No,
we would
I know,
argue
right.
for a couple years, and it'd be around 50 where I would give in because I love you, I guess, but I would be not happy about it.
Right. Yeah, I just wonder. I was just wondering if I
honestly, I would.
I'm just wondering if you would still have that. Well, if she really wants it attitude.
No, of course not.
Okay.
I would. Even if the child-free connection never existed, I would sit down and really discuss, assuming that I had the knowledge now that I didn't have then. Mm-hmm. I would sit down and discuss it with you and just basically say, hey, not just from a math perspective, but this is not something that I want. And we need to have a real discussion on why you want it and what that's going to look like if we decide to have a child, what the dynamic is going to look like.
Yeah.
I believe in a 50-50 split as far as responsibility. I'm not saying I'm going to go into the whole you have to take care of it type of thing, but it's just something that we would have to have a real serious discussion about for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's not going to happen. It was just a hypothetical.
I know.
It
was this very scary question, so I'm happy it's not. I'm happy it's hypothetical.
So let me ask you this, because as child-free women, this comes up so much, and I'm wondering what it's like for child-free men. I don't know if I've ever asked you this before. When you are at the age when all your friends, your male friends, I know that we both have both male and female friends, but your male friends start to, or even your female friends start to have children, what was that like for you? Did you notice a shift? Did anything change? Did it stay the same? Did it affect you? Was it even a thought? What was that like?
Yeah, great question. Mid-30s, early to mid-30s, my friends started having kids, and I was originally very happy for them, but I also didn't realize that our relationship would change, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It changes. You just have to accept that.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, your relationship with your friends are going to change.
So going into it, you had no idea what it would be like after. Okay.
I just assumed, again, we would just continue doing whatever we wanted. We would hang out and so on and so forth. And the trick part of that is at the beginning you actually do, because the baby just sleeps all the time, and so there isn't much change to the friendship. But as the child gets older, the friendship begins to change, not in a bad way. It just changes. So, for instance, a lot of the things that I was invited to, there'd be getaways, obviously like golf getaways and stuff like that I would do with some of my friends, but without kids. But that was few and far between. But what I realized was I was confused. I think the word would be I was confused. Most events involved around me going to them to be with their kids. It was never I don't think any of my friends ever took their kids and brought them over to my apartment in New York City.
Right.
It was always like, this is what I'm doing. You're my friend. Come join.
And to clarify, I think that, well, this happened with my friends. I'm assuming it happened with yours too. Once our friends had kids, they moved out to the suburbs. So there is a travel involved.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a little jarring. It was confusion met later with jarring. It was a jarring kind of, realizing that our friendship has changed in a sense that the availability is not as often as it used to be.
And how did that make you feel? Were you able to...
It didn't feel great. I felt myself like, I'm more alone than I have been. I used to be surrounded by friends. We used to be spontaneous. We used to do whatever we want. So I felt more alone. I understood why.
Did you vocalize it to any of your friends at the time?
No. No, I think it was one of those things where I feel like I'd be laying on a lot of guilt. Like, oh, why you're mad that, that we're not the same because I have kids. I don't know. It felt unfair. So I never vocalized it or had the hard conversation. Looking back, obviously, I have a whole different approach I would have taken.
And also the word unfair, because saying that it's unfair is giving our friends with children we're holding space for them and their new lives and their new lifestyle.
Yeah.
And there is a sense of holding space for us that they need to also compromise and take part in. And obviously everyone's different. And some people can do that and some people can't. And some people want to and some people don't.
Yeah. So funny story. So for men, at least in my experience, and it seemed like other men shared this experience with me. So as your friends start to have kids, you have this like circle of friends, right? We used to, when someone had a kid, the circle of friends that hadn't had kids yet, we would say, oh, we've lost another one.
Right.
It was one of those things where, and that I remember thinking like, what do you mean? And then I started to get it. And then that
Right.
circle starts getting smaller and smaller and
Right.
smaller. And then you realize it's like two of you.
Right.
And it's like, where did they all go? They all have kids. And again, I'm not saying my friendships didn't exist after that. It was just different. I had good friendships with them.
Yeah.
After they had decided to have children. All my friends who had children, they were just different. Looking back, I might have been a little resentful, selfishly, because I wasn't able to do the things with them that I used to be able to do.
Right.
But, you know, how selfish of me, you know? It's just like, because I can't have my friendships the way I want them, I'm going to be resentful. That was one thing that I probably regret a lot, is having those feelings, even though I didn't vocalize them. So looking back, I look at it as, you know, me putting forth more effort to spend time with them and their kids. And I started to do that towards the end before like we moved to Austin and so on and so forth. And I do that now. And I don't do that forced. I genuinely care about my friends' kids, because the friends that I have, that I've stayed friends with, are the friends that really count. What?
They all have kids.
They all have kids. And I understand that's their priority and the most important thing in their life. And I open up our conversations with, how are your kids doing? You know, what are they up to?
Right.
Tell me about them. And I'm into it now because I don't have kids. So it's kind of nice to vicariously live through your friendships and your friends that have kids and not have to deal with all the craziness that goes with it.
Right. But I also think that there has to be some kind of middle ground, right? Because we get this question so much of how to handle your friendships. And I think resentment builds when you don't vocalize something, right?
Yes.
Which is what you just said.
Yes.
So if you were to vocalize to your friend, listen, I really want to spend time with just you. And so you let me know when you can do that. Then if your friend is willing to not get upset at that and really make an effort that you really just want to spend time with them. So I guess my point is there has to be a give and take, because
100%.
there's no way that the friendship can sustain the different lifestyles without both people meeting at some point in the middle. And I think that maybe one side has to sacrifice more certain times, and then the other side has to sacrifice more depending on what. But I did the same thing like you. I wasn't really vocal about it, and I did build some resentment around it. So I think vocalizing how you're feeling in a just loving way, I think could really go a long way.
Yeah, I think my advice would be, looking back, is don't make it a scorecard. It's not about how much time you spend with their kids and how much time you guys get to spend alone, as your old type of friendship was, you know, or trying to recreate that. My advice would be, spend some time with their kids if you truly care about them, as much as you can take, you know, if that's something that you're not comfortable with, like me. I mean, I don't think I've ever changed a diaper,
Right.
but, you know, but as far as,
Well, people don't have to spend time with their friends' kids if they don't want to.
they don't have to,
Yeah.
but I think it's a nice gesture because that's important to them. And if you care about your friend enough, you're going to spend some time.
Right.
But again, it's not a scorecard. And I say that because it's really important to do what you just said, which is vocalize. Listen, I've spent time with your kids. I love spending time with your kids, but I need some time to hang out with you. And you can even say, I need some time to hang out with you because I'm going through something, or I need to spend some time with you because I miss our friendship and I want that to stay intact the way it can, and that part of it anyway. And if they're a good friend, they're going to understand that. So there's a gentle way of vocalizing it without it feeling, you know, any type of tension or weirdness around it.
No, I agree. Definitely. So how do you think your family feels about us choosing to be child-free?
They don't vocalize much about that. I think my mom was confused when we decided to launch the Childfree Connection and discuss it. Probably as much as I was, I guess. Like,
I mean, my family was very confused too.
but what do they think about our choice?
I mean, are they disappointed? Do they ever say like, too bad, or we wish? Or I'm just wondering, I guess, because since we've only been together 7 years, we're both older. And I wonder if they think that if you had met someone who wanted kids, things would be different.
Well, I'm not inside their brain. I don't know. But I do know that at this point, both parents, or I would say my mom, I don't know about my dad, my stepdad might have, but my mom said, I'm happy you didn't have kids. I don't think it was the right thing for you to do. But I didn't receive a lot of pressure. So she didn't reverse course.
Right.
But that made me think that she is happy with my decision.
Yeah.
Deep down, would she have wanted to have a grandchild? Probably at some point, maybe even now. But she understands my choice. She didn't give me a lot of pressure, as I mentioned before. So I don't know if that she was kind of waiting on the edge of her seat for me to call her one day and say, I'm pregnant. We're having a baby and it's going to be this amazing thing. And my brothers have lots of kids. So she's surrounded by grandchildren. So she might've been like, all right, actually it's enough. We don't need to have any more.
Right.
But,
right.
having
Exactly.
4 brothers with all with kids.
Right.
But yeah, I think I answered your question.
So you and I talk a lot about knowing ourselves really well and knowing what characteristics that we have that we don't feel would mesh well with parenthood. So can you share one or more, whatever you want to share, characteristics, traits that you possess that you feel because you are a certain way that would really not go well if you were a dad?
For me, I know myself, especially now, more than I ever have. And that came from a lot of, real work, therapy, et cetera. But I know myself in the sense that I have zero patience. I am very particular about
Everything
being clean. I have I need a lot of time to work on myself. I'm constantly struggling to make sure that I'm present and I'm not stressed out. I have high anxiety. So I personally now know I was not built to have children. I'm not saying I couldn't have pulled it off, but who wants to just pull off anything? You want to be immersed in that experience.
right.
And based on my characteristics, my DNA, my genetic makeup, whatever you want to say, as far as who I am as a person that you know very well, the chance of me enjoying fatherhood would probably be in the lower 10 percentile.
Right. And I think that, and again, what you said, right? This doesn't mean that, and we feel if we did have children, we would do the best we can. And we really feel that you can find joy in many things in your life in different trajectories. But we know ourselves enough to understand that this child-free path is best for us because we both truly value our exploring ourselves and our self-development and our relationship. I think that that is really important to us as well about how much time and focus we put on our relationship.
Yeah. I mean, if we want to get into the perks or the pluses of not having kids, my personal, number one perk that comes to mind is self-development and physical development and staying healthy. I'm a hypochondriac too. That's another reason to throw that out there. But being, invested enough in myself from a personal development and a physical development, and that also translates into our relationship, which is really important. I think we've done a really good job of, using our time that we have to keep our relationship in check,
Yeah.
to be present, to really, we can sit down for an hour in a day and discuss things that are bothering us.
We do.
We can go to therapy and really say, hey, we have time to work on this. Give us all the tools that we need.
Yeah. Our couples therapist is
Is fantastic.
amazing.
Love her. She's
I
really
actually
good.
don't think we would have the relationship we have without her.
Yeah. So all that self-development in our relationship is I won't say probably, is my favorite part about not having children, because really that brings me happiness,
And we're able to, and we have the time, the energy, the effort, the finances to prioritize it.
Right.
And we both put it as our number one. Our
Yeah.
relationship to both of us is the number one thing that we care about the most.
For sure. Yeah.
And Eddie,
And our son.
our dog.
And our son, Eddie. Not to be confused with the human son, but our dog's son.
Exactly. Okay, so I have one last question,
Sure.
I think. And I'm wondering what your favorite fun perk is about us being child-free.
It's easy.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought you were going to think about that one.
Spontaneity. I mean, I love that we can wake up in any given moment. Obviously, we have work and we have to take those things into consideration. But outside of that, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
It's important for me, especially, again, it comes back to like my mental health, which is being able to get that release of going for a walk in the middle of the day or going to the gym and exercising to kind of get my blood moving and just make myself feel a little bit better and get the dopamine bubbling and so on and so forth. So spontaneity. And then of course the fun part of traveling and going places. I know I don't do a lot of that lately. But
Well, we've been working a lot.
we've been working a lot, but it's there, right? It's always just sitting there waiting
Yeah.
for us to say,
Let's just
go
go.
let's just go. And to me, the reason why it's easy is because freedom like that is powerful. It allows you to not just have fun, but to take risks, to work on things that might be a little out of the box, to take career risks, to take personal risks, to take all kinds of risks. And so the freedom and the spontaneity is my favorite. It's what I get excited about every single day.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And ironically, if we didn't have the freedom, the spontaneity, the time, we wouldn't have been able to create and launch and grow the Childfree Connection. So,
Well, we would have had kids, so of course we would. That would have been weird. We have children, but we're going to tell you why maybe you shouldn't.
I don't mean that. I mean, as far as taking a
I know what you meant. I'm joking.
thought and turning it into a passion project and then continuing it to develop it and grow it, because we have so many ideas
Yeah.
for the Childfree Connection, and just having such excitement and such energy to put towards that, I think is really cool.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. It's amazing to be able to do that and to take the time that we want to really explore all types of avenues.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
course.
Like I said, we had quite a few people. I'm pretty sure I covered all the questions that they asked, but knowing what is inside the head of a child-free man is so important. And so thank you so much.
I'm happy to let you know what's in there.
Thank you so much for being so honest
Of course.
and open, and I'm sure that we'll have more conversations moving forward. So
Love
thank
it.
you. Bye, babe.
Bye.
If you were surprised to hear anything that Rick shared or have a follow-up question for him, go ahead and comment below. And also, I'd love to know if you're interested in seeing more of this type of content. Rick and I touched a few times on the idea that we consider ourselves a family, so you should watch this video next where I talk about the concept of family as child-free people. We appreciate you, we thank you, and we're excited to see you next week.